All right.
All right.
So, Quinn, we wanted to set up this call since we've been going back and forth a couple times on a couple different Facebook posts, and obviously we know each other. We've hung out in the past, and I kind of want to just have a conversation with you, respectful conversation, regarding a claim that you have. Why don't I kind of like leave it up to you? You explain the claims, talk about yourself, and then your claim as far as what's going on in the current events.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I think this is pretty cool. Again, I think it's just really important before I just go into that. I think it's really important to have discourse. I think people need to be able to talk to each other, without having it to, get to a disrespectful point. It's easier said than done, but I think it's really important to have discourse and for people to just like at the end of the day, like because of the system that we have where people get to vote, like it's really, really important for people to be able to talk things out, like hear each other out and stuff. So I'm glad you invited me to do this.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no. Thanks for accepting because like I agree with you. Discourse is super important, and so often, whether it's Democrat, Republican, black, white, whatever, they're so tribal that it's just like they automatically pin the other as like the enemy, and like they're not human, and you can't have conversations with them. And I completely reject that premise wholeheartedly. So
So look, we're already agreeing on things.
there we go. Love it.
So
Starting off good.
so my claim, I think, generally speaking, and this is something I have a few friends who are Trump supporters or who have voted for Trump. Um, and I honestly have a strong feeling that he's like a con man. Like I just think that he just says whatever he thinks he needs to say to get people to support him. And like it's not just from the political side, but if you like look at his trajectory, since before politics, like he's always been like a salesperson.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that he is really like he has a very unique set of skills. And a big part of that is like marketing um and entertainment. He's very entertaining. And I think that he just has found like the perfect formula for how to get elected as president um, in this country in the current like the current with the current collective consciousness that we have in the United States right now, which is not that like it's not that great. No matter what side you're on, I think that collectively we as a country are not doing well when it comes to things like values, civic education, critical thinking, um, just overall consciousness. Like there's a lot of pettiness, there's a lot of ego, um, and I think that, yeah, and there's a lot of division, there's a lot of mistrust of government, of each other, and I think, and then there's a lot of poor policies that have been created by politicians. And I think somebody like Donald Trump has been able to like take advantage of all of these factors and use them to his advantage. So for example, like when he came out on his first like big announcement when he was running for president, like on his very first speech, like what does he say? Mexicans these people who are coming from Mexico are all rapists, or they're murderers, they're rapists.
We're starting off strong.
And
There you go.
and
He
then he
didn't
said
say they're all right.
and then he said there's a few good ones, but now anybody who has any level of intellect or intelligence knows that that is a very irresponsible message thing to say. You know what I mean? To say that they're sending us there, it's implying that you're using a broad stroke and you're painting anybody who's coming across that border as a criminal. Most people of good conscience who have good values would be like, nah, that's messed up. Like, of course, there's some people who are criminals, but like, how could we possibly imply that all of these people are criminals? And so I think somebody like Donald Trump, he deep down, I think he knows that, but he also knows that he can use that to his advantage. Like he can, like, if you look at it from a strategic place, why would you say that? Why would you say that as a politician? to get, to get people who are already angry about something like that and rile them up, to get them to come to you. To you know that there's already people who are upset about a certain thing, whether it's legitimate or not, you can still incite anger to get them to think that you're going to be their champion and you're going to be the one to solve their problems. So I really think that that's who Donald Trump is. I spend a lot of time trying to understand his psyche,
Mhm.
and his character, and I think that's what he does. Like he's when you when you look at his answers that he gives like during interviews, um, it's all over the place. Like they ask him a question about the Bible, and he's like all over the place. He's trying to, you could tell like he's trying to say the thing that is gonna be the least kind of like get anyone to like he gives these generic answers that are kind of just like politically safe, He'll be like, yeah, Jesus is amazing, Bibles are awesome. The Bible is great. Who doesn't love the Bible, right? The other day I saw an interview of him um talking about somebody asked him what his favorite song is or something, or what his favorite genre of music is. And he was like, I love great music. Isn't music great? Who doesn't love music? Music is great. You know what I mean? So that's the type of guy that he is. And then he'll probably throw a compliment in there.
Uh-huh.
He'll probably say something, some boasting comment about himself. And you know, and actually he did. He was like, when I was a kid, I was in music class, and I was my teacher told me I was the most brilliant kid in that class. I was the only one who could tell all the notes on the piano, and then that's what he does. Um, but I think he also understands like confidence. So to project confidence is a psychological strategy. So I think he purposely at first, I just thought he was just a completely megalomaniac, narcissist.
Mhm.
But now I'm starting to believe that he understands that to project confidence, it projects like people like that. People like to see confidence.
Mhm.
Even though confidence does not equal competence, it doesn't matter for a lot of people. It's just like, man, if he says something enough times with enough confidence, people just start to believe it, regardless of if it's true or not. And I think this is something that he very much understands, and that's how and he's been able to attract the following that he has attracted. Um, and that's not to say that there's things that he's done that I don't like. There's certain things that he's done that I actually think are good. Um, but I'm very critical of him as like his his leadership um disposition, I guess I would call it, like his character. I have a lot of like serious like criticisms of it.
Do you think he's a stronger leader than Joe Biden?
Hmm. I think he's definitely at this point getting he seems like he's a lot more motivated. He seems like he's getting a lot more done, than Biden. But I use that word seemingly very intentionally because the other thing that Trump has understood is the symbolism of like um, plastering everything you do, everywhere. Keep like again, we're going back to this marketing thing. It's like any little thing, any little achievement goes up on social media. We,
Mhm.
I did this, Trump in all caps, me, Trump, me. This
Mhm.
would not have happened if I was not president. I've never seen anybody do that. Like I've never seen a president act that way before. I think he does it intentionally. So I think if you ask that question to anybody, most people would be like, "Yeah, he's done a lot." But the real question for me is, I'd have to look at it like I'd have to do an analysis. In Biden's first 100 days, what did he accomplish versus what did Trump accomplish in his first 100 days? I'd have to look at it because at the end of the day, not every president is going to be as boastful as Trump. You know what I mean? Any little thing, Trump, I did this, you know? So it looks like he's doing a lot right now. When it comes to
Is
being a
he
good
not?
leader,
Is he not doing a lot? I mean, first of all, you didn't answer my question, which is fine. Second, is he not doing a lot? I think he signed more executive orders than any other presidents in the first, whatever, 100 and something days. Is that,
He
so he
did,
is
yeah, he
doing.
does have a record. He does have a record for executive orders.
Mhm.
So yeah, if that's what we're basing it on, if that's what we're judging what a good president is or what a
That
good
was one
leader is.
example, but executive orders is one example. I don't,
Mhm.
I'm not saying that's everything. Okay. So
Yeah,
let's not one of the things I want to get something clear is when I make a statement, if I'm making a statement generally or broadly, like for example me bringing up the executive orders, by me saying that I am not saying that that is everything and that should be only thing that's counted, you know what I mean? So people like to say like, well, that doesn't mean that's everything. It's like, yeah, I didn't say it's everything, but I am stating a fact that he's done more executive orders than any other president, so there's a record there, right? Whether you agree with 100% of them or not, I'm sure if I read through every single one of them, I probably wouldn't agree with 100% of them myself, right? Um, there are a lot of things that you just said right now that I would like to refute, but honestly, I really want to just kind of stick to the claim. So you say that Trump is a con man, and you gave your examples why, right? So to be a con man means to con people. And to con people means that you're gaining something, you're getting something out of it. Would you agree?
absolutely.
Okay. What is Trump gaining by conning America and Americans?
It's I think it's a very like a big ego boost for him. Like he gets to say, "I'm the president."
Okay.
For somebody who's very egocentric, that's a huge win. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
This is something that he's been wanting to do since '90s. Like there's old interviews with him from the late '80s, early '90s, talking about being president.
Hmm.
Um, so he likes to have power. He's a power player. For him that's very fulfilling. I think it's a personal fulfillment thing. And on top of that, he's a businessman. So we can't. It would be very irresponsible to not mention all of the money that he's making right now because he's using his platform as president to like double his wealth, like his fortune, his family's fortune. Um, People are saying it's no big deal because it's open, like it's out in the open. But we've never seen a president do what he's doing in terms of like, there's certain like standards of decorum that a president is used to have. It's the highest office in the country. You want to set a good example. You want to, show that you're not. You want to publicly, as much as possible, show that you're not being corrupt. At least past presidents have done this. Jimmy Carter comes to mind. Like he made his fortune from being a peanut farmer. He walked away from all of that when he became president because he didn't want anybody to be like he's going to use the platform to make himself rich. Somebody like Donald Trump gives zero F's about that. He's like, yeah, I have the biggest platform on the planet right now, and I'm going to use it to sell my meme coin, like literally out of the White House. You know what I mean? Like he has no shame about it. So I think
Hmm.
he's trying to make more money for himself. He loves to be rich. And back to your question, since that's fair, I didn't give you a clear answer. Is he a good leader? Um, it's a I want to give like a long with a nuanced answer, but my simple answer is in my opinion, he's not a good leader. Um,
Well, the
I
question
don't
was, do you think he's a better leader than Joe Biden? Like, lead your
man, that's a
country through good times and in bad. And I'm specifically making it like a binary, right? In good times and in bad, right? Would you choose Joe Biden as your leader, or would you choose Donald Trump?
yeah, so
I'll even
easy
give
answer.
I'll give you a little leeway. I I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for whoever's going to see this interview, right? And this conversation. I I'm not a type of person that if you were to answer Donald Trump, that doesn't register to me that like you support everything Donald Trump does and you're now a Donald Trump fan. So I'll give you that leeway to answer how you feel that you see fit.
So I got a simple answer for you. But first I want to premise by saying I'm a registered independent. So I do try to see things objectively on both sides. However, I will also admit that I'm more left leaning than I am conservative.
Hmm.
Uh, so that's full disclosure. I think that the most important thing people can do in this country is vote based on their personal interests. Like, what are my needs? What are my interests? Because as an individual, the man, I need to make sure that I can take care of myself. if I have a family, take care of my kids and my family, and my, so based on my personal self-interest, I think I would choose Biden over Trump. And there's a few issues I can name specifically. One being, I'm finishing up my PhD. I have a ton of student debt. Republicans and Trump have made it very clear that they have no interest in supporting students who have acquired a lot of student debt. Like, so that's the easiest one. It's like, why would that just makes it easy right there. Like, I could definitely use some support paying off all of this debt. But in reality, I know the argument is if you took out a loan, it's your responsibility to pay it. And I think there's other arguments to that. Like, if you're somebody like me who works in the public sector and I'm giving back to my community with this education, I think that's something to be considered. In a lot of countries, governments do pay for their youth, their young generation to get college educated. We don't do that because there's one party that doesn't believe in that value. But in a lot of developed nations, higher education is not expensive, and in many cases, it's free. So that's just one issue. The other obvious one is just like tax breaks for the rich, which is very relevant right now because of the bill that was just voted on, the big beautiful bill.
Are they just for the rich?
Yeah, so the big one that I think a lot of people found appealing in that is that, people are, they're talking about no income tax for like that benefit for people who work at restaurants, no income tax on social security, something like that. So I actually saw a post on that by the senator from Maryland, I forget his name, where he was like, yeah, those benefits actually expire after a year or two. The ones for the lower class. I actually just saw I just shared it with a friend last night. Taxes is going up like 15% for people who make less than $30,000 with this bill. And then the things that they're using to incentivize people to support it, like, those benefits to restaurant workers, no tax on tips. That's the one that I remember. No tax on tips. So that stuff is actually it's only for a year or two and then it expires. And we should confirm. Anybody who watches this, go confirm it, Google it. But this senator from Maryland was showing this. He's like, yeah. So people are saying this is a great idea, but look at the plan. After a year or two, those are going to expire. But you look at the tax cuts that are going towards the rich. Anybody who's making over $100 million a year is getting huge tax breaks. And it's not that they should pay more, but if I'm paying 24% income tax based on my salary bracket, and I'm middle class, I'm upper middle class, to me, my personal opinion, it doesn't make sense that if somebody's making over $100 million, that they pay a smaller percentage of taxes than me. Like, if I do believe that if you make over $100 million, like, you're good. You know what I'm saying? Like, pay your taxes. There's a lot of right-wing arguments about, rich people should not be taxed because they are the ones who invest into the economy. But those arguments, there's never a guarantee that if I'm a billionaire or a multi-millionaire, there's no guarantee that I'm gonna go and take my money and give back in some way or invest it or create jobs. I could literally just take that money and move it offshore or just invest it into hedge funds. And that's what a lot of rich people do.
Let me interject here. You and I are roughly the same age, right? For as long as I can remember, and I would assume you probably remember this as well. I've been hearing that rich people don't pay their fair share in taxes. Okay. Who pays the majority of taxes in this country?
Like what demographic you mean? Like what age, what salary bracket
Yeah.
pays the most?
Like, let's just say so all of the tax income that comes into this country, we have a bucket of 100%, right? Um, what percentage of income tax comes from people who make 50 grand or less?
I don't know.
Give me a guess. I don't know the exact answer, but I know. Give me a guess. And
I would say that it's less than whatever the wealthy class is contributing.
so tax it. Tag the income taxes right now. I think 90% of income taxes come from the top 1%.
Hmm.
So when people say that rich people are not paying their fair share in taxes, it like I used to think like, oh, that's messed up. Like they got to pay their fair share, right? And then like I started seeing stats, and I'm just like, holy crap! Like poor people don't pay barely any taxes in this country, or compare like they contribute very small amount of the income taxes in this country. That's a better way to say it versus them versus me saying that they don't pay taxes. They contribute a very small portion of the income tax in this country. So, and then also the way that rich people earn their money is different from the way that poor people or middle class people earn their money as well, right? Versus earned income through wages, also or investment income as well. So that's completely different, right? So the way that I flip houses, and most of the time when I'm paying taxes is going to be capital gains tax, right? Well, that's taxed differently than if it was just a salary position W-2 earned income type of tax. So it's almost like we're playing different games. You know what I mean? So when people say that rich people don't pay their fair share in taxes, I was a Democrat most of my life. And I guess what I voted for Trump in this past election. I still don't consider myself a full-on Republican. Where you said like you're center, you lean left. I'm center and I lean right. Right. I voted for Obama both elections. Was all my life thought that I was a Democrat. And then I started kind of looking into these things and like the whole thing, all my life hearing that rich people don't pay their fair share in taxes. And then like after a while, I started thinking to myself, I was like, man, I've been hearing Democrats say the same friggin' thing for the past 30 years. And it's just like nothing ever changes no matter who gets into office. Democrats get into office, Republicans get into office, they still complain about the same thing. The past few elections as well. And I'm not talking about just when Trump, I'm talking about even before when Obama was running as well. Democrats are always saying this is the election to protect democracy. And then obviously that exponentially grew when they were going against Trump, right? Trump is going to ruin democracy. Trump is going to ruin democracy. And I'm just like, it's just all noise. That's how I'm starting to feel at this point. I can't really take them seriously, especially when it comes to the media on both sides, admittedly, right? Fox News does some stupid stuff, CNN does, in my opinion, more stupid stuff, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. So, yeah, for me, that I'm so unconvinced by the rich people don't pay tax conversation that unless I see any severe data that yeah, I mean, if do you have as a rich person, do you have ways to pay lower taxes because you have more write-offs? Sure, but anybody in the poor middle class can work their way up to get to those points as well. They're just earning their money in different ways. So they can't expect to pay the same amount of taxes. That's my opinion. I mean, I'm open to hear your thoughts.
I just think like if you look at the data over the years, like looking at the deficit, right? The deficit, like yeah, that's a big problem in this country, and I think both parties at this point
Agreed.
are
I
super.
agree. I agree. Deficit
Um,
is a problem, yeah.
and I think both parties are guilty of adding, every time, every cycle. But you can see like a trajectory of like the Bush tax cuts that came in 2001, 2002, like the national debt like just skyrocketed after that. And this is directly correlated with tax cuts for the rich. Because at the same time as we're doing tax cuts, we're starting new wars. 2003, we invaded Iraq. And that was a big thing. I remember I was in high school, but I'm like, I remember just listening to what was going on. And I'm like, we just did tax cuts. Like it was a big deal, the Bush tax cuts.
Mhm.
And we're invading a country, and I'm just like, how does this make any sense? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot
Um,
of people are talking about that war a lot. There's a lot of controversy around us invading Iraq, and like people are like retroactively looking at it and saying how it was a big mistake. Now, it is
Absolutely.
easy to be Monday morning quarterback, but it wasn't a good idea, in my opinion, to invade Iraq.
Me too. Me too. I remember vividly. I remember vividly because it was very messed up. Like I remember getting into an argument with my science teacher. I was a sophomore. He was a super like war hawk. He's like, we gotta take them out. They got weapons of mass destruction.
Mhm.
But I'm like, but you can also see like people arguing that there's no evidence and like they were just kind of tuned out. I'm just like, that movie Fahrenheit 9/11 had come out,
Mhm.
Michael Moore. And granted, I know he's a very left-leaning person, but like that was legit. Like he was literally asking the question, like, where's the WMD? Like, where is it? And we're still out here fighting this war, like pretending that everything's cool. Like, it was insane.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, that whole thing with that you were
Taxes.
saying about the taxes. It's a very, very complicated subject. I honestly, I gotta give it up to people who can debate. I was watching some YouTube videos the other day. Um, this guy named Sam Cedar, who's like a leftist, who's debating a bunch of right wing like college students. That guy Charlie, whatever, that he's a conservative.
County Kirk.
Yeah, he did the same thing on that same program. But I'm just like, man, how do you have the time to do the deep research in order to like confidently debate some of these things, like especially when it comes to like inflation and economics and all this other stuff. Um, I will just say at the end of the day, the more resources you have, the more likely you are to know how to cheat the tax code, how to find those loopholes, which Donald Trump himself admitted when he debated Hillary Clinton, that he uses the tax code that was created by her and her friends, quote unquote, right? And I guess that was a big gotcha to Hillary Clinton. And yeah, I agree. Like she's part of that, corporate Democrat or just corporate politicians. But the thing that surprises me is that like Trump supporters will see that and be like, yeah, Trump, stick it to the man. And then I'm just like, did you catch the part where he's also taking advantage of these loopholes to make himself richer? Like just because he's calling it out doesn't mean that he's actually trying to do anything about it. He's actively participating in that same corruption that he's calling out. And that's the thing that I see him doing a lot, where he'll call something out and then a few months later or something, he'll just do it. And then it's like he never it's like his supporters are very forgiving, or they're either forgetful or forgiving or dismissive. I'm not sure. But there's so many videos you could pull up of Trump saying one thing, and then a few years later he did the complete opposite. He's like complaining about Democrats or Obama doing XYZ. A few years later, when he's in the position of power, he's doing the exact same thing. And then it's like, whatever. Why does he get away with that? Like that's why I said that I think he has figured out this formula that's very potent. Like because he's got his followers at the on the tip of his fingers. You know what I'm saying? Like he could do or say anything, and they're still gonna make excuses for him. They're still gonna justify him. They're still gonna dismiss whatever hypocritical thing he did. And
That's not
it's
true.
just
Have you
like,
seen how much the right has been fighting over the him bombing the nuclear base in Iran?
you know what? You're right. I have seen that. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, speaking of, and the Israeli issue is a big one where I'm very impressed to see people on the right, diverging from Trump on these issues, and that's huge.
Mhm.
Uh, so not everybody, but like his loyal people are still they don't care. They don't seem to care if there's a direct hypocrisy or a direct contradiction that he's performing. They just seem to not care. And it's just like, damn, but I like for me especially now that like I used to be a hardcore, progressive Democrat. Now I'm as an independent, I try to use objective I use an objective approach. Like these people are human beings, they're not perfect. They're gonna make mistakes, but we need to hold them accountable. You know what I mean? Like no matter what party it is, these people have a lot of power. So if you just give them like the free reign to do anything because of who they are, that's a big risk. There's this term called identity fusion, and I think that's what's happening with a lot of Trump supporters, and it happens on both sides, where people fuse their identity with the leader. So if there's a hardcore Trump supporter, and I say, "Hey, I don't agree with this thing that Trump did," they take personal offense to it. They're like, they get upset. Oh, here we go, another libtard. I'm just like, and I'm like, so any criticism of Trump automatically makes you a libtard. Okay. Like,
It's so funny because I feel the same way about hardcore Democrats. And honestly, you're so far one of the few people that I've reached out to or commented on in Facebook. I've had people block me. unfriend me, block me, just because they put up a post on Facebook, which is a public forum for everyone to see what you're posting about. And if you comment with facts, either destroying their thought process, their claim, or disagreeing with their claim, and you're backing it up with facts, I have the perspective that people on the left just hate arguing with facts. This is again, I have a small sample size, right? I'm not like someone like Charlie Kirk who's out there debating, hundreds of people, right? But in my small little sample size, and it was I would just see the way the conversation is going, and I'm just like, bro, I'm just like I'm giving you nothing but facts, and you're just like spewing just like how you feel about it, and I'm just like, this doesn't help your case at all. And then before you know it, they're blocking me, and it's just like,
So the emotional dysregulation is a big problem, and that's one of the things when you first brought up this idea that came up to me is like we need to make sure we have a civil conversation because for me, when I start seeing people get overly emotional,
Mhm.
that's it. I'm done. Like I'm done. You know what I'm saying? Like we can't even talk because this is just purely emotional to me.
Yeah,
And when there's so much emotion that is involved in it, there's like reason goes out the window. It becomes just a pissing contest. I'm right because I said, because I'm right, and there's no other possibility.
yeah,
And then you're just trying to prove somebody wrong just for the sake of proving somebody wrong. I feel like it turns into that, and I've been sucked into that myself, and I don't like that. I don't like that feeling. I don't
Mhm.
feel like I'm in control. I feel like it's not a good representation of who I am as a person, and I really dislike just being sucked into that energy. Um,
Mhm.
the other the other thing that came to mind was when we talk about emotions, it's really interesting because it like during Trump's first term, there was like this term that was this word snowflake that they were, whenever somebody from the left like complained about something that they were triggered by, um, somebody on the right would be like, look at these snowflakes, they're crying about anything, they're so weak or whatever.
Okay.
Um, because they were being like, they would put pictures like of like people crying, wearing the pink pussy hats and stuff, and they would make fun of them, right? And the
Okay.
funny thing is that like now it's like the tables have turned, and I'm not sure if people have noticed this, but like I've noticed that people on the right now, like hardcore Trump supporters, they're the ones who are I'm seeing becoming emotionally dysregulated as well.
Mhm.
Um, like
Are you
a
talking about
lot
like
of
people,
these,
personal like circle network or like famous people? Who are you talking about?
just like yeah, things that I've seen like going viral and stuff. You know what I mean? Where I'm just like,
Okay.
when you have like Pam Bondi, for example, like the secretary, what is it? She's the attorney general, I think.
Mhm.
She's being questioned on Congress, and her responses are like super emotional. Like she's like, "How dare you say that about Donald Trump, the president of the United States?"
Mhm.
Like, and I'm just like, dude, it's just a question. Be professional. You know what I mean? Like she's like trying to put up this big, and I'm just like, for the group of people that pioneered calling people out for being over emotional and calling them snowflakes. Like, what are you doing? Same thing with the press secretary. They call her when the people on the left are calling her KK Carol, whatever her name is.
Mhm.
She like when she's answering questions from the press corps, it's just like you could tell she's like angry. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, dude, they're just asking you questions. Like this is actual questions that people are curious about. You know what I mean?
I think you're looking at this with a very biased lens. Can we go back to previous press secretaries and see how they look?
I never liked the one that Biden had, the last one. I thought she was
Yeah.
definitely so these people who have that job, their job is to just, you know, be an echo of whatever narrative or messaging the president wants to get across. But I just anybody who's in that role, like
It is a pretty
have
miserable role because you're constantly being questioned and they're constantly trying to frame questions that make you and or your administration look bad on both sides, right? Admittedly. I think her name is like Caroline Levy or something like that. Um, but um, but yeah, that's funny. I'm actually I think she's one of the better press secretaries because if the press asks her stupid questions, she'll straight up call it out. And maybe, you don't like that, but for me, it's just like I think the press needs to be held to a higher standard for a lot of the stuff that they do. But before we like go further down this rabbit hole, I kind of want to get back to the original claim, right? Original claim, Trump is basically a con artist, right? So you brought up the fact that, he's doing certain things to make himself richer while he's in office, which is in your eyes, what's a good word for it? Not becoming of a president. There's probably better adjectives that I could use, but I'll say it that way for now. Um, I haven't looked into this personally, right? But I'd be curious to find out, has Trump's wealth increased or decreased since he's been gotten in office? Do you know
I
or
saw a stat. I saw a claim the other day that said his wealth has probably like doubled or something like that since he's gotten in the first few months of him being in office this
Mhm.
term.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Uh,
something crazy like that, something extreme.
yeah. Little side note, when you were talking about back in for Trump's first term, when he got elected, I actually wasn't happy that he got elected his first term and how things have changed in the in the past decade. But little side note. I would argue that Trump's life has significantly gotten worse since he did the run for presidency. The reason why I would argue that and why I would counter your claim saying that he's not a con artist is because no con artist would put themselves in the spotlight to con people when it's going to objectively make their life worse. People weren't calling him racist before he was a president. Maybe individuals, but like the masses were not calling him a racist. They loved him. Oprah loved him. The View even had him on, and now The View can't stop talking about how much of a racist he is. They've tried to take his life on multiple occasions. I mean, what con man would sign up for this level of treatment from the masses, and then also to have your life almost be taken? I mean, it was literally just like him moving his head is a miracle. I'll just leave it at that. So I can't agree with the fact that he's a con man because it's like, what is he getting out of it? He's already rich. He's already a billionaire. What are you gonna make him more of a billionaire? I don't see it.
So I think that's subjective. We'd have to get into his head and really ask him. Because everybody's gonna have their own view on what he must feel like right now. But at the end of the day, you never know. I think it's a calculation on his part. Like there is
But
definitely
when
some
you say it's
risks.
subjective, just be more specific on what you mean, because I feel like I gave you some objective things that would be a reason why I wouldn't make it
So what
better.
I what I mean is objective is like you can go from person to person and ask them, do you think Trump's life is better after he became president? And I think that's since we're not Trump, all we could do is give a subjective answer. Like I think maybe he's worse off, or I think maybe he's better off. So it's a perspective thing. You know what I mean? Like
But when I bring up a clear fact that more people now than ever are calling him racist when that wasn't happening before, when there have been multiple attempts made on his life, those are not objective things that I can bring up.
those are objective, yes.
Okay.
But when you look at the like if it's a cost benefit analysis that he's doing,
Hmm.
right? Where it's like, okay, I'm putting my life at risk by running for president because people might want to assassinate me.
Hmm.
Versus I become president and quadruple my family wealth and become the most important person in the world, control the strongest military on the planet, um, like ultimate ego boost, ultimate high. If you're a narcissist, you're getting this is the stuff that you get high on. You know what I mean?
Now we're getting really
So
subjective, but go ahead.
no, I mean I think he's a definition like he's the definition of a narcissist.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that to diss him. I'm saying it from a scientific perspective, from a psychological perspective. He seems like a textbook example of a narcissist, and a lot of politicians too. Just to be fair, but you can look that up later if you want. But these are things that like like he doesn't drink, right? He doesn't drink alcohol, but everybody has their vices. You know what I mean? And I think one of his like what he seeks for pleasure is attention, validation, power. All these people who he surrounds himself with who are constantly telling him how amazing he is. That is what he is seeking. So again, maybe I'm not sure how he's thinking about it, but maybe it's a cost benefit analysis. Like, yeah, people are calling me racist and I might get assassinated versus look at all these people who are basically slobbering all over me right now. Look at all the power that I have. I can attack Iran using B-2 bombers just because I feel like it. You know what I mean? Like that might be.
Bro, that statement right there, you're such an oversimplification for you to make that statement. It's like it's careless. It's a careless statement for you to make. He just didn't feel like bombing Iran, and just because he woke up one day and says, "You know what? I think I'll bomb Iran." You know it's not that
No, he
simple.
didn't. He didn't. It was not that simple, but he can. But he can. Like, and that's the power that he has. Like he doesn't have to ask anyone for permission. That's the power that the president has. You know what I mean? And
This is
that
again
having that
not true.
power could.
Also not true. Also not true. He has to go through certain measures to make certain decisions. He has advisors, and depending on the decision that's being made, he also has to go through Congress as well. And obviously, he didn't go through Congress to do the strikes in Iran, but he didn't need Congress's approval to do strikes. Because if you're going to use that objective measure, then you would have to criticize Barack Obama as well, who did way more military strikes without congressional approval.
So I'm not arguing that Obama was the same when it came to this issue. What I'm trying to say is anybody who gets to that office is
Mhm.
going to have a lot of power. And
Agreed. Agreed. I don't disagree with
and
you. Yeah.
and so when you have that type of power, like maybe it's worth the risk. Maybe the way, I don't know, again, I'm not in Trump's head, but for
Mhm.
him, it might be like, yes, I'm getting called a racist and people are out trying to kill me, but look at all this power that I have amassed. You know what I'm saying? I'm the commander in chief of the most powerful military on the planet. So, you don't get to that level of power without giving up certain things.
So
So
I couldn't resist, and I just did a quick Google search. We can probably look it up further, but I just did a very quick Google search of Trump's net worth. This is as of 2023, October 3rd. It says his wealth is at 2.6 billion. And then back in 2016, it was at 4.5 billion. Assuming that this is true, and we maybe had to check the sources because it's saying right now Wikipedia, I think it was based on Forbes. The other one, I think it said it was on the annual Forbes 400 list. Okay. So assuming that this is true, again, so now that just helps my case just a little bit more, whereas his life has objectively gotten worse. He's lost money, people have made attempts at his life, and he is now the most evil man in the world. He's not everything he does is racist. He tries to enforce our border security, and that makes him racist, even though presidents before him have done the same exact thing. So I think there's just a huge double standard when it comes to Trump. Um, and that's my counterclaim to your claim that Trump is what is it? That Donald Trump is basically the biggest con man in the world.
yeah, so it's not that and he might not even be thinking about how people are calling him a racist because again, like look at who he surrounds himself, right? Like he might see people on the news calling him that, but the people around him 24/7 are kissing his ass. Look
Okay.
at Marco Rubio. You know what I'm saying? They are constantly telling him that he is the best president in the history of the country. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not sure if you've seen these these uh these staff meetings where they have in the White House where they're literally going around and every cabinet secretary opens up their statement with a compliment to Trump. And I'm just like, this is crazy. It looks like something out of North Korea.
Okay.
Why do they have to do that? Because Trump, that's what he likes. If you don't do that, he's not gonna like you. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But what do you create? You create this echo chamber where you create your own reality. So regardless of what people out there are saying, those are just the haters. I know the truth. People around me tell me what keep it real with me or whatever his point of
Yeah.
view is.
We would like to make sure our people around us, because obviously you could have people around you who will lie to your face, but we try to make sure that we have discernment to make sure we don't hang around with people like that. Would you agree?
Absolutely. You should definitely have people who are going to challenge you, like not in a disrespectful way,
Mm,
but nobody has all the answers. Nobody's a genius. Nobody knows everything. Somebody
yeah.
should tell that to Mr. Trump
Yeah. Okay.
because he's the
So
expert in every issue, according to him.
So would you, so some of the biggest issues that were happening during this election that just happened, the main items I would say would be immigration. I think it was the economy, the economy, and what was the third? Probably abortion. Okay.
No more wars, I think was a big one.
Which one? No more wars.
No, yeah. Like
So let's
spending like Ukraine, there was like all the money we were giving to Ukraine was a big one.
so
You know,
that
that has to do with war.
government spending was obviously an issue. So maybe let's talk about how Trump is doing on illegal immigration and government spending, right? And maybe
Yeah,
you and
great.
I will probably find some agreement on the government spending aspect, but we'll start with immigration.
Yeah.
How do you
So
feel about
immigration.
Trump's stance on illegal immigration? Not immigration. People love to mince those terms. All right. I want to be very specific. Illegal immigration. I have yet to meet a single right-leaning Republican who says we don't want any immigrants whatsoever. We are all for legal immigration. We're talking about illegal immigration.
Yeah. So I agree. It's two different things. Where do I start? So this one's it's a very complex issue, and we don't have time to go into the history of like why we have the type of immigration that we have, like the immigration system.
Mhm.
Um, at least not deeply. We can't go into it. But really quickly, because of the Cold War, going back to after World War II, the United States invaded a lot of countries and
Yeah.
disrupted a lot of countries
Proxy
and
war.
caused a lot of harm. Okay, Vietnam War was the biggest one. The building I'm in right now is owned by Vietnamese immigrants who the father fought in that war and came and fought on the American side and came as a refugee and settled here in Lawrence. That's the Liu family. Shout out to the Liu family, Liu's Cafe.
Sick.
So there was a ton of like maybe 50 or more countries were invaded, something insane like that, right? Toppling governments. Iran is a great example coming up in the news now. Iran was actually a very modern country with modern values.
Yeah.
Um,
When the Shah was in
but
charge.
no, before the Shah, they had an elected the democratic government that disagreed with the United States. So the CIA went and did a coup, and who took over? The Shah. And then
Oh,
things
I think
became.
the
And
Shah
then
was before and Khomeini is now.
you know what? You might be right. But
Okay.
anyway, the reason the CIA got involved and did a coup in that government was because that leader, democratically elected leader, was not agreeing with the United States foreign policy. I don't know if it was about oil. I don't know if it was about the Cold War containment policy. Maybe they had some socialist or communist policies in place, but it was all about under the guise of keep containing communism. Almost every Latin American country was invaded by the United States between 1960 and 1990.
Mhm.
A lot of those countries were completely decimated by those interventions. So like before the United States invaded the Dominican Republic, the peso was like triple the value of what it had now. That's one example. Um, so Salvador Allende, another great example. This is the president, the democratically elected president of Chile. The CIA did a coup, took him out of power. He ended up, killing himself, I think. Well, I think it's one of those things where we're not sure what happened, you know.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But a brutal dictatorship took over for decades. Same thing in Nicaragua, Pinochet. So the CIA empowered these dictators to take over in all across the world, in Latin America especially. And all they had to do was be puppet governments for the United States and CIA. Basically, sign away your natural resources, do implement whatever policies we want, and then this strongman dictator would be left. The United States government would turn a blind eye. They could do whatever they need to do in order to maintain power, including use U.S. military support to put down any kind of uprising. So what does that do to Latin America and all these other countries over time? Is it obviously it destroys the local economies. It deprives the local people of their own natural resources. So there's a significant reduction in opportunity. So what do people do when there's no opportunity in their country? you look, you see, you hear about the America, the land of the free. You know, everybody makes money over there. So there, you know, you're suffering from crime. Your country suffers from high crime, all this other stuff. So you start, you know, and then the United States, knowing that, became that the policy was the immigration policy was in consideration of all disruption that United States military intervention has caused around the world, we're going to have a flexible immigration policy where we're going to do asylum. We're going to allow people to come here and seek asylum because we're acknowledging that we really did screw up a lot of these people's countries. And so, out of like a sense of
We're
compassion,
talking like back in what, 50s,
70,
60s,
60s,
70s?
70s, 80s.
Yeah, okay.
So, out of a sense of compassion, that's where we have these asylum laws that came into place. And that's where we see a lot of people coming, even if they cut the line and show up at the border at a port of entry. All you have to say is, I'm seeking asylum. And then there's a process where they investigate. They go to court, immigration court. The judge has to determine what is the evidence and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
And then the immigration judge determines if you get asylum, you get residency. If you don't get the asylum, you get sent back. And
Hmm.
so when you look at the numbers of people that were being deported by Obama and Biden, this is what people need to really understand. These people that are being deported by Obama and Biden are people who are rejected, who their asylum proposal was rejected. So they got deported back. That's who they were deporting. And then they were deporting criminals and people who have like, they were prioritizing people who have criminal cases, like heinous crimes. So I don't really buy the narrative, the right-wing narrative that Democrats were letting everybody in and that they don't care if these people were rapists or murderers. They still were giving them food stamps and giving them rights. I don't know that any of that is true because, as you just said a little while ago, Obama and Biden were deporting millions of people. And then so the criticism is, why is everybody mad at Trump when he's deporting people? Well, I just explained it. The people that Obama and Biden were deporting are one, people who were denied asylum. So they got sent back after having their due process. And two, people who are not uh people who are involved in the criminal, they're charged with crimes
Time
and they're
out.
not.
Time out.
But
Obama was not doing due process for every single person that he deported. That's
yeah,
factually
no,
correct.
yeah, it's not. You're right. What I'm talking about what I'm talking about due process is for the asylum seekers. So they
Okay.
went through a process. Okay. Um, to be deported, you don't necessarily need due process.
Mhm.
As far as I know. The issue that we're seeing is that Obama was focused more on people who are criminals, like people who have criminal records. When Obama and Biden were deporting people, you didn't see these ICE raids tearing families apart, tearing kids out of mother's arms. Mother is just gave birth and there she's deported. Like the baby is now like she's not even gonna be able to breastfeed her baby. You know what I'm saying? That type of shit Obama and Biden didn't do. Trump is doing that with pleasure because they're trying to send a message. So
You're
when
telling
they're
me that. Oh, go ahead.
well, I'll just finish with saying that when you see this criticism, this intensified criticism of the way that Trump is doing his immigration policy, it's not a double standard. It's by design. Trump's administration is doing a more harsh approach to immigration because they're trying to send a message. So that they're purposely going and sending in heavily armed federal agents. It's all a big show because they want to send a message that America is no longer welcome. We're not going to do this anymore. We're not welcoming all these asylum seekers anymore. They're trying to send a message. So when people are now when you see more intense criticism of Trump versus Obama and Biden, that's why you didn't see families being torn apart, as at least not at the same significant degree that you see it today with Trump. And Trump is actually they're trying to meet quotas at this point. They want to be able to say that guy Miller, he wants to be able to say every month we deported 100,000 immigrants in July. And if he's not able to say that, he starts going off. Like there's reports of him trying to yelling at the department heads, why haven't we deported more people? So they're purposely finding any vulnerable, like they're going to people's this is the other thing that Obama wasn't doing or Biden. They weren't they weren't ambushing people at their immigration hearings. So, for example, if you have somebody who's been here for years and they're doing their legal process, even after they came as an asylum seeker, they're attending all of their interviews, they're attending all their hearings.
You don't know that don't know that all of them came as asylum seekers. So
I
this is
mean, that's what they do, though, isn't it?
are you aware? No, some of them crossed the border illegally also. And are you aware as well that during the Biden administration, anybody could literally show up, whether it's at a port of entry or if they tried crossing illegally and got caught, then they could then claim asylum. And then instead of remaining in Mexico, Biden had the, come in America and we'll figure you out late. We'll figure it out later. So Biden got rid of the remain in Mexico law, or if you want to call it a law, rule, whatever the proper terminology is. So that people were literally just showing up and just saying, "Okay, yep, give me my court date," and then we have no idea where they went inside the country.
Yeah, so that I mean, that's his as president, that's his prerogative. If whether we disagree or agree on that. My
Do
point is
you
that
agree?
they
Do
were
you
not.
agree with that prerogative? Do you agree with that decision from the Biden administration? I'll ask Quinn personally.
I don't think it's a smart policy. Like, honestly, I think there needs to be like when people say there needs to be a law, and the law needs to be respected. I agree. Like whatever the law of the land is, that's what we should be following. Um, but like this idea of ambushing people and then claiming that they're criminals, when you are all the only thing you're guilty of is crossing the border, let's say, right? Which is an offense. It's an offense. But if you've been going to your immigration hearings every 2 months, you've been doing your interviews, you've been keeping on track with everything, and then they wait for you to come to court suddenly to deport you. After years of investing, after years of paying lawyer fees and government fees to get your legal residency, and this is tons of people who have been in this process for years, they're saying we don't give a shit. You're out. That right there is where Democrats and Republicans are going to disagree. And I'm going to lean with the Democrats on that because I'm just like, at this point, these people have families. Like these people are ingrained in the society. They're part of the economy. They're paying taxes. As a matter of fact, they pay more taxes. There's been a lot of people I feel like don't acknowledge that a lot of these people they pay taxes and they never file for taxes because they're undocumented. So whatever they pay in taxes, they just goes into the government revenue. They never get anything back. So it's not, and then the way that they're being labeled, these criminals, it's not true. In a lot of cases, these people are just hardworking ass people who are now integrated. They're married to U.S. citizens, and just to paint with a broad stroke and say they all gotta go is, I think that's a ridiculous idea. Like it's not, it doesn't make sense to me.
So, all right, there's a lot to respond to. You make a lot of claims in your monologues. So when you say things like, "Oh, Obama administration wasn't ripping babies out of mothers' arms," that's a very triggering statement for you to make. Do you have any evidence whatsoever that ICE agents have ripped a baby out of a mother's arms? And even if they did they not allow that baby to go with her when she was being deported?
I'm going based off specifically the situation that happened in Worcester, where there was an ICE detainment and like the neighbors came out and there was like that ended up being um like a big mob
Yeah,
situation.
yeah.
That in that incident, uh the mother was detained, as far as
Okay.
I know, and the baby was separated so that the mother could be detained. And that's where people started flipping out. So that's what we're talking about here. It's like there's a way
Well,
to
we
go
well,
about it.
well, we don't know. So I have a couple of things to say about that. Number one, we don't know if that baby, if that child is gonna end up being deported. If that mother gets deported, we don't know if they're going to. More than likely, they will allow if she requests, they will allow that child to be deported with her. More than likely. Okay. Secondly, I have to say with this. If you are being detained by any type of law enforcement and you are with a child, they're going to separate you from that child. This is not nothing new. If you have a daughter and you're driving drunk and you get pulled over and you get arrested, you are getting separated from your daughter. So it's no different
Yeah.
than when an ICE agent who is tasked to enforce the immigration law of the land They look at someone who entered illegally, who basically broke a law, right? And they're going to be separated at least initially until they figure out what the situation is. Is this person actually a citizen? Do they have legal status? No. All right. Are they getting deported? All right. If the mother requests for that child to go with them, I have yet to hear of any case where the ICE agents are like, no, your child has to stay here and fend for themselves. It's just this.
Yeah,
It's just
so
happening.
yeah, no, in that case it becomes, I think, a choice. Part one of the factors in that decision is like is what's going to be the best outcome for the child. In a
Mhm.
lot of these cases, like I'm thinking about a Cuban family in Miami or Florida somewhere where the
Uh-huh.
mother was detained and is being deported. The father is now gonna decide, like a lot of these Cubans, which is also another really messed up situation. A lot of the Cubans that came more recently are people who are political, they're enemies of the state in Cuba. So that mother is gonna, if anybody who gets deported back to Cuba, who came in recently in the last 5 or 6 years, they're going to, they're, I hope not, but they're probably gonna go straight to jail.
Yeah.
And who knows what that regime is gonna do to those people. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So in that case, I think it becomes very important to think about like what's gonna be best for the kid. Like some of these people actually did leave their countries. They came, granted, illegally across the border because they really were in dangerous situations, whether it's like extortion, gang related, whatever. I actually have a student in Lawrence High School who has a um, special like permanent resident card that was given to him by the Department of Human Services. That
Mhm.
it says this is a refugee who fled violence in Dominican Republic, believe it or not. So some of these people do come, I think they've been able to make the case, and I would be very concerned about somebody like they just escaped from a very dangerous situation, and now they're being forced to go right back, like without anybody giving a crap about what's going to happen to them.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll speak for myself, right? I mean, I'm not a Trump apologist. I'm not a Republican apologist. I'll speak for myself. The way I look at the situation is, it's very unfortunate. Um, it is very unfortunate. I look at it as almost like a necessary evil, where like we can't just have open borders, right? A country without borders is not a country. We need to, at some point or another, start enforcing our immigration laws, and this is going to entail some unfortunate situations, right? And to kind of drive the point home, I'll use an example. The president of El Salvador, Bukele. Have you heard or like seen a little bit about how much he cleaned up that country?
Oh yeah, that's his legacy right now. So
Yeah, so I
that's a
mean
lot
that
of
was
he
like
gets a
the
lot of
murder
credit.
capital, if not the world, definitely of the Americas. And now it's one of the safest countries because he basically just somehow or another through, Congress and presidential power, whatever, just rounded up all the if you look like a gang member, you're getting locked up, right? Um, do you not think that there were some innocent people throughout that process that ended up locked up as a result of Bukele's policies? So like
I would put money on it.
you and I would both put money on it, right? So I guess the only point that I'm trying to make is like this, this it's like light and dark, right? Like you're gonna do a good thing, but there's gonna still be some bad things that are happening to good people. You know what I mean? So in Trump enforcing the immigration laws, and actually one of the first few that I've seen in a while, actually like really like putting his foot down with it, there are gonna be some unfortunate cases. And they do, they are very sad. But the way I look at it is like no one is entitled to enter this country illegally. No different than I am not entitled to enter Germany illegally. If I enter Germany illegally and I work there for 2 years and pay taxes and then they catch me and they deport me back to America, it's like sucks to suck. I got caught. Like it really, I hate to be that blunt about it, but like I'm not entitled to be a resident in Germany. I don't know where this entitlement is coming from. And this is what bothers me, that people feel entitled to these things that they're not actually entitled to. Yes, you have unfortunate circumstances, but if that was the case, then we would just have to take in the entire world because there's poverty all over the world. So why does somebody who's right next to us in Mexico or someone who traveled through Mexico, why do they have priority over someone who's been waiting on the waiting list for the past 5, 10, 15 years? Why do they get priority?
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. That's a strong argument around, putting a halt to that sense of entitlement.
Mhm.
I just think that it has to be done in a more thoughtful process.
Maybe like a more
So
seemingly compassionate manner, I guess. That is that kind of
the
what you get.
compassion is definitely a factor that I would factor in because of my value system, but I've come to learn that not everybody gives a shit about compassion.
Hmm.
Or maybe they just think about it, they apply it in different ways. But anyway, I think it's more about feasibility and like where you're going to cause the least amount of disruption to like the welfare of the country. Even Trump himself came out a couple weeks ago and made a speech about how they're going to stop targeting undocumented immigrants who work on farms. So that shows you that even he is being forced to realize that this approach is too strong. Like you're not taking into consideration the unintended consequences. I think
Okay.
when I
Well,
say,
is there any credit for him to course correct and be like, all right, well, this is gonna have too much of a negative effect, so let's
well,
course correct.
I think that's good. I think that's good that he's doing that. But the crazy thing is that people have been saying from the beginning, like, dude, like this is gonna happen. If you do this, this is gonna happen. And we're all just a bunch of libtards if you say that, you know?
Mhm.
Um, but I think there has to be like, first of all, like close the border. Like if I was in charge, I would say we gotta close the border, bring that under control. But people who are already here, who are integrated into the fabric of the society, figure out a way, maybe, and this has been talked about for years. Maybe they have to pay a hefty fine, because there has to be a consequence, there has to be accountability. But they're already integrated into the society. They're helping, work at the, they play an important role at the grocery store or whatever. Their kids are on my son's soccer team. You know what I mean? All that stuff. Like they're already integrated. It seems very draconian, I would say, or just brutal to just be like to just pluck these people out of a social fabric that they've been part of for years now. You know what I mean? Like there's kids who these dreamers, right? They were brought across the border when they were 1 year old, and now they're 18 or 20 years old. They don't even speak the language of their home country. I think there has to be nuance, the way you do it. You can't just say everybody gotta go. It doesn't make good policy sense.
Yeah. I will agree that, I mean, on most of these political discussions and topics, there's usually nuance. I will agree with you there, even though I do have some strong opinions, one way or another on certain of the political discussions. But yeah, I mean, there definitely is room for nuance in this discussion for sure. Like, but I have to keep going back to it's a decision, in my opinion, that needed to be made, especially after, the things that were happening in Denver, Colorado, with the gangs taking over the apartment complexes. The innocent girl that was murdered. It's probably happened more than once that was murdered by the border. If it was not for the lax policies on immigration, that probably would not have happened. And people always try to use the excuse of like, well, Americans, commit more crimes, that American citizens commit more crimes than illegal immigrants. And it's like, yeah, but we have to deal with the American citizens. We don't have to deal with illegal citizens committing crimes. That's the difference. So for me, it's kind of a very silly, and it's such a non-argument in my opinion. It's like it's like you saying, you're upset that um, somebody else's kid keeps starting fights, and they're like, well, your kid starts fights too. It's like, yeah, well, I have to deal with my kid. I don't have to deal with your kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. Totally understand that. That sounds reasonable to me, honestly.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing that comes up for me is just like I think when I come back to that con man argument, I think it's not just him. I think it's not just Trump. I think he's also uplifted. He's held up by a whole infrastructure that I think is supporting him. Like this right wing media beast. It's powerful. Um, First, like, and it's very very clever. First they were able to convince everyone that all the media is fake news.
It's
That
pretty
right
bad.
there.
It's pretty
So
fucking bad.
so we can talk about. you know, the issues with the media, the news media. They have it's flawed for sure. Sensationalism is probably the biggest, you know, problem that they have. But at the end of the day, this is a capitalist country. Everything revolves around money. They're gonna do whatever these news corporations are gonna do whatever they feel like. Most of them, the ones that are less driven by journalistic values and more driven by profit margins. At the end of the day, they're gonna sensationalize as much as they can get away with, so that they can bring up their ratings and make money. All right. So a lot of these 24-hour news cycle places, that's what they do. They're in the business of increasing their viewership.
Yep.
So a lot of people like to say it's a conspiracy. The liberal news. It's not. It's not. Basically, what's going on is that Trump is a very inflammatory figure. So he comes out, as soon as he came out into the political realm, he came out swinging. His first claim, Obama is not even a legitimate president. This guy in the White House, he wasn't even born in the United States. What is he doing there? By the way, the first black president of the United States. Do you think that's a coincidence? I don't.
Well, this is where I would strongly suggest, if you can stomach it, watch Candace Owens series on her looking into the lineage of Barack Obama and where he was actually born and stuff like that. There's quite
Okay. I mean, I honestly these days I have a lot of patience for Candace Owens. I agree with her on a lot of stuff she's been saying. So maybe I will
she's
check
been
that
getting
out.
a little bit more aggressive on the Israel thing, but like she's kind of going, people talk about Trump derangement syndrome. I think some people have Israel derangement syndrome, but I basically the point that I'm making is I don't think Trump just plucked that out of thin air and just decided
Okay.
to say he's not a US citizen. I think there's like there's like some iffy evidence, you know what I mean? So that's all I'll say.
I mean, I looked into it a little bit, and maybe I didn't. Maybe I gave up too quickly, but for me, it was like I think what did it for me was the Hawaiian government produced a birth certificate, and then like after a bunch of talk about it, the Hawaiian government was like, okay, fine, here's the birth certificate. And then the birth certificate came out, and then people started saying the birth certificate was fake. And that for me was just like, you know what? This is never gonna end. You know what I mean? So that's where I just stopped. But
Okay.
not just that, not just the birth certificate thing, like any little thing that Obama did was horrible. Anything that Biden did was trash, if you ask Trump. Not only that, but like anybody who doesn't speak highly of him is automatically trash. So the problem is, like I said, he's a very inflammatory person. Just that's his character. That's why he was on WWE. Like that's his thing. He loves the tit for tat. That's where he thrives, right?
Mhm.
When somebody like that comes onto a political scene, and politics before Trump, believe it or not, was still respectable relatively. Besides Bill Clinton and what he did in the White House, most politicians still held themselves to a certain standard of decorum.
Okay.
At least publicly, at least publicly. So a lot of them were still doing corrupt things on the low. But Trump came out and didn't give a shit about decorum. You know what I'm saying? He just was like blasting everybody, talking about everybody, being politically incorrect, and that's another reason his followers love him, which is very interesting. Another very interesting dynamic because he lies a lot. He lies a lot, but he's also honest about things that other people don't like to be honest about when it comes to political correctness. So because of that, people think he's honest even though he lies. And this guy is fascinating to me. Like to me, he's a psychological case study because the guy, like you said on Facebook, all politicians lie, but this guy literally, like he will say one thing today and next week he'll completely either contradict himself or it's like you can't trust anything he says. Like you just gotta wait and see. And what just to be fair, what I'm calling him now is unpredictable. Trump is unpredictable, and I feel like everybody can agree with that. Okay. But the reason I'm saying he's unpredictable is because he says things and then one day and then he says something different another day, and then he does something else. And then when you see what he does, then you're like, okay, so this is what he was trying to say the whole time, even though he kind of said the opposite. I'm like, okay, like, and that's who he is. I've learned to accept that. But it's very fascinating that like other politicians, they get a lot of shit for lying, but Trump doesn't. Like people see him as an honest guy, but it's because he's politically incorrect. But he still is very dishonest. Um,
Yeah,
he
I mean,
there's been a lot of different things that he's been caught, you know, in a lie about. So
uh,
and it's fine. He's a businessman. He's a salesman. At the end of the day, he's trying to tell people whatever he thinks he needs to say in order to get to the next level. You know, to get to the next step. That's his persona.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
I just don't see how this is. Again, maybe he felt called to make changes that he saw that we were headed in the wrong way. I honestly feel like we were headed in a terrible direction. After the Biden administration, things were just getting, in my opinion, horrible. Just with we can talk about right. Immigration was absolutely horrible. Kamala would have continued the open border policy, which would have been fucking terrible for our country. I was even though people try to downplay it or whatever, but the whole gender ideology, men and women sports was becoming an increasing problem. Was only going to continue to get worse, in my opinion. What else? Um, I can't really talk too much about like the economy and like the spending because as far as the big beautiful bill, we talked about it a little bit earlier. I'm going to fully admit I've heard both. I've heard arguments for the big beautiful bill, and I've also heard arguments against the big beautiful bill. One thing that we have to absolutely agree on, this is factually true, is that it is going to increase the spending of the country, right? It's going to increase the budget, it's going to increase the deficit. But like people are saying, yes, that's true, but here are the incentives that will account like compensate for that or pay it back in the future. And the other people are like, this is fucking terrible. What was the whole point of Doge? That we were trying to cut government spending. So like I'm like somewhere like I don't know how I feel about it yet. I don't have a strong opinion for or against if I'm 100% honest about it. So comparing Trump to past administrations when it comes to spending, he has definitely increased his spending. I will not deny that. I'm not the type of Trump supporter who's like he can do no wrong and he is like I don't even want to say it because for me there's only one God, but you know what I'm getting at. Which is probably the impression that a lot of people on the left think about Trump supporters, where like he can do no wrong. Where no, if there are certain things that I don't agree with, I don't like the fact that we are increasing our government spending when the whole point of Elon Musk being in Doge was to reduce government spending. We spend a lot of money on a lot of stupid things, and Elon Musk pointing that out was like really eye-opening for me. Like, what? We're doing what type of study in Uganda or Kenya or insert country here? Stupid study, insert country here. That's what America's spending money on, right? So,
yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. It really is. It's hard to disagree with.
yeah. So, I don't see him as a con man. Maybe somebody who is very hyperbolic, I'll agree with you there. But as a con man, I don't see how his life has gotten better since becoming president, since becoming president. I mean, maybe better in the sense that like, yeah, he gets an ego boost or whatever, but like, dude, like, my wife can give me an ego boost. Does that make me a narcissist? I don't know. So it's just, it's,
Yeah, I
but
I think the clearest thing that I can point to is just his affinity with wealth. You know, he's same with a lot of billionaires. They are pretty much the only way you can be a billionaire in a lot of cases if you are obsessed with making money. Um, you know, I'm just this is my own analysis. It's not that I saw that in a research study. It's my own assumption.
got it.
His whole life he's been a moneymaker, you know, and so I think that's what it comes down to. I think that he understands that in politics you can make a lot of money. Like even if he's not making as much as right now as he was
Yeah,
before, and I think he might
his net
be
worth has gone down.
so now that you shared that, thank you, because I'm gonna look into it more closely. Because now I'm really interested because I have been seeing these reports of like how much money he's making, like exorbitant amounts of money with like the Trump coin, like everybody who buys Trump, like all the transaction fees that anybody pays when they buy or sell Trump coin, his family is profiting, you know?
Okay.
So that's just one example, but there's a lot of different business deals that are happening abroad with the Trump brand right now, you know. But besides that, uh, I honestly just want to say that it's really important, I think, for me to acknowledge that I think that when I was talking about the media, how there's a whole media apparatus, a right-wing media apparatus that holds him up and like defends him for the most part. There's a few people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson who are now being more critical of him, which is great. I love to see independent voices. Um, but they're able to take small issues and blow them up, you know, so to make it seem like if it's a bigger thing than it actually is, you know. So like if an incident happens in Colorado, usually what happens is the state of Colorado deals with it, or maybe if they need federal support, they'll deal with it. It doesn't become just because something happened in Colorado, it doesn't become like this national cry for reform because like one thing happened in Colorado. The other thing I like to focus on is when I bring this up is like the trans issue. Um, where according like when I listen to people who agree with Trump on this stuff, they some people make it seem like it is the end all be all issue happening in America right now. Trans people are taking over. They're taking over our schools. They're trying to brainwash our kids to be gay. The gay agenda, this and the gay agenda, that. And I'm like, okay, so I can think of some states like Maine has a policy where they allow, I think, trans people to be in the sport opposite of what they were born. You know, Massachusetts legislature recently passed a resolution that says there can be no bills that there can be no bills to prevent that from happening in Massachusetts because that would be a form of discrimination. I think that's silly, honestly. Like personally, and I might get I might get some hate for this or some criticism, but I agree. I forget somebody made the argument the other day that there has to be just a different way that we test people, like that we evaluate who's fit to participate in these sports. Maybe it's you test their hormone levels instead of just looking at their gender when they were born. But if you like to me, and most people, I feel like 95% of the people that you will ask this, regardless of party, if you put a transgender woman who still has the physical, like the physique of a man, uh, even though they're identifying as a woman, meaning like they're stronger, you could see the musculature, the masculine musculature, biological of a man, that it makes absolutely no sense to have allow that person to compete about against someone who was born as a female. Um, so the reason I actually asked some state legislators in Massachusetts why they did that, like why did they pass that in Massachusetts? And the answer was basically like special interests. In Massachusetts, the gay lobby is very strong. So right now, the people who are running the legislature, the senator of the president of the Senate, and the leader of the House, they're probably getting tons of like tens of thousands of dollars from the gay lobby, from the gay rights lobby, to push these bills and make it into policy. And that's the answer. So a lot of the times when people think about there's a conspiracy, really it just comes down to money. The same thing with like you mentioned Israel. I think it's a legitimate criticism. Like, why does Israel have so much influence over all of our political leaders? Like, if I were to run for office
It could be
today,
a call all on its own. So I don't.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, it's like one of the, it's like always, I guess my point is always follow the money. You know what I'm saying? When you look at crazy, like ridiculous policies, you're just like, how can anybody agree to that? My suggestion would be look at who's paying for that. There's obviously a lot of money that somebody's paying these politicians to vote that way. And that's what it is. It's not necessarily a Democrat issue or a Republican issue. It's that a certain group of people are pumping a lot of resources into making sure that this policy becomes law, you know?
And
And you
why are
can
they
look at
pumping
any
it
issue.
into? What is typically the demographic of the people that are pumping it in as well? I have to respectfully disagree with your stance on the trans, and you basically, I think you're downplaying it too much, in my opinion. Um, I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for other people. Most people that I hang around with don't give a shit about gay people, trans people. Do your thing, live your life. But it's when you impose upon us to divulge into this thought process that you have that we don't agree with. And we're basically being forced to say you have to recognize me as I say, otherwise it's a problem. Or it's just like constantly being thrown in our faces. Like it's almost like if like the way I look at it, I'm gonna oversimplify it. If you're gay, just be gay. But you don't have to flaunt your gayness in my face. Just like you or I don't flaunt our heterosexuality in people's faces 24/7. It would be weird. I think it's equally weird when gay people do it as well. That's as simple as I can make it. I can get into more detail. Maybe we can set up a separate call about it, but that's how I feel about it in a nutshell.
Yeah, so I think, but who's putting it in your face? Like, and that's where I go back to the right wing media apparatus.
Mhm.
Like, they can take something that happened somewhere, and they can make a decision. We're gonna blast this on every channel that we own, on every radio station that we own, and this incident that happened in some gay neighborhood in California, or in P Town in Boston. I mean, in Massachusetts, Cape Cod.
Yep.
And we're gonna blast it so much that we're gonna make everybody think that this is happening everywhere, and it's a problem that everyone is dealing with.
I
Like I
mean,
remember
listen,
I had to talk to somebody who's a right wing person in the media locally, and they were talking about the schools, and Lawrence High School came up, or Lawrence Public Schools came up. I've been a teacher and an administrator in Lawrence Public Schools for 12 years, and this person was like, "Yeah, why are they teaching kids to get abortions? Why are they teaching kids to um why are they handing out condoms, and why are they showing people how to be gay and how to be trans?" And I'm like, when, who, what class, who's teaching this? Like, where in the curriculum does it say that we're doing that? It doesn't. Maybe in a health class they're talking about 1 week. They're talking about sexual reproduction and how there's contraception is an option. But that is, if they're talking about that for 1 week or 2 weeks, like, how is it that we're gonna say esa escuela no sirve?
mhm.
Democrats are ruining our schools. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really not that, like, so now because
Oh,
you're being made to
you're
believe.
moving the goalposts. Now you're talking specifically in schools, and I was talking about in the countrywide. I can give you plenty of examples countrywide.
So here's the thing about that, right? So like a pride parade, right? A lot of people who are on the right side, I think, criticize like how openly gay folks are about like celebrating their gayness and
Oh,
their
there's a lot of
homosexuality.
degeneracy that happens in prize parades, bro.
Okay, so I honestly think that there's the philosophy behind that level of public display of expression. It's a political state, and I can understand the reasoning behind that. And basically, what it says is we have been suppressed, we have been oppressed for most of human history, and
Mhm.
we are here, and we're proud of who we are because growing up everybody told us that we should be ashamed of being who we are, and this is our day, this is our month to say we're not afraid to be who we are, and that's their way of doing it. And so for a group that has been oppressed for being who they are, like I can see the thinking behind that. You know what I'm saying? And that's it. Like, as somebody who I I see myself as somebody who tries to understand the plight of people, of groups who have been oppressed.
I can
And
understand that.
from that perspective, I say, that's their way of speaking up for themselves or standing up for themselves. Now, I'm sure that there's stuff that goes on in those places that are.
Take it a step too many. The thing is that all right. Do you remember when we were kids, high school, pre-high school? I remember, and I think you'll agree with this. Okay, I remember when I was adolescent. All gay people wanted was to be able to get married. There was none of
That
this
was the
like
thing. Yeah, that was the thing. Yeah.
there's none of this like trans ideology and stuff like that. And I'm not even criticizing the fact that trans ideology exists now, even though I don't agree with it, but that my opinion doesn't fucking matter, right? I remember when we were younger, all gay people wanted was to be married. Gay marriage was legalized. Look how much further it's gotten. Explain to me right now how gay people and trans people don't have rights. it's like saying black people don't have rights in this country. And it's just like, what rights do you have that do I have that they don't have?
I think in Massachusetts, a very progressive state, we have a lesbian governor. You know, in a place like Massachusetts, I think gay folks are pretty good. So
Okay.
I think it depends where you're at. You know, like there's definitely like pockets of
Are we talking about,
conservatism.
yeah, maybe pockets of more, let's call them red states where they're super right wing, okay? Are we talking about like there a higher likelihood that they'll be discriminated against? Is that kind of what we're talking? Is that what you're leaning towards, or are you thinking something else?
Yeah, yeah, we're not too far removed. Like even Boston, like I remember I used to work in the facilities department at Salem State. There was like this OG dude who was like one of the guys who was in charge, like one of the foremans. And he would joke around about when he was our age. This is me and my buddies, we were like 20 years old. He would joke around about when he was our because like it would be Friday and we'd be like, oh, what we're gonna do is Friday. He'd be like, oh, when I was your age, we drive around Cambridge and look for I don't want to say it, you know, the F word that people use to describe homosexuals. And we would either beat the shit out of them right there on the sidewalk, or we would force them into the car, take them to a dark place, and beat the shit out of them. Um,
Terrible, terrible.
and this is and so you know that's the guy who he's an older generation guy, but I'm like that stuff was happening right here in Boston, you know, so you never know. And the
Yeah,
other
but
the other big the other big piece is like uh you know what, I'm not even gonna go into it. It's a long thing. It's
we,
gonna
we
like
can
I was
set
gonna go
another
I,
talk about it. Well, I
yeah, I was
mean,
gonna go into like how you know the whole like people being born, that argument about are you born gay or not, like I think that also feeds into it, but that's
yeah.
another that's another topic.
Yeah, I mean, I can see your thought process behind it. He's like, well, why do they feel this need to express it this way? Is basically because they feel like they've been oppressed, right? And in my the way I look at it is like, okay, but are you oppressed today? Have you been oppressed for the past 10, 15 years? Yeah, so can we bring up exceptions in like little pockets of small examples? Sure, but generally speaking, we're a very secular country that is very accepting of gay people. Would you agree or disagree with that? Very generally speaking.
I think
Like
I
seeing
agree
a
I
gay
agree and
couple in America is not like a shock anymore like it used to be.
it's becoming more accepted, and I agree, and I think that's a good thing, honestly. I think people should be allowed to express themselves as long as they're not committing any harm towards anybody. I think
So
people should be allowed to live how they choose to live.
my and again and I'll repeat, right? Like most of the people that I've they think very similar to me. We really don't give a shit what you do behind closed doors with your sexuality, right? Because there's probably some terrible, nasty stuff that heterosexual people do behind closed doors. I also don't want to know about that either. So the thing is, like, I'm equally critical of heterosexuality and homosexuality that's too much in your face in public. I'm an
Yeah,
equal
I agree.
oppor- I'm an equal
It,
opportunity critic, if that makes any
mhm.
sense.
Yeah, yeah. Like I agree. There has to be standards, like especially when kids are around and stuff. Like I also criticize. Like I've seen these drag shows where like I don't know what the context is, but these viral videos that have gone on where there's like
Drag
drag
queens,
shows happening
choreographers.
in front of like 5-year-olds, and like I don't know if it's like a preschool or kindergarten class, and I'm just like, why are there mostly naked adults dancing around in front of these children? Like, I don't
Just,
care what gender you are. I don't care what your social sexual orientation is. It's like it's a sexually provocative activity.
oh,
Why is there this I don't know, like they wanted those
it's
people
not
seem like
appropriate.
they wanted to do it.
I
Yeah,
make it seem
so
it's just not appropriate, and I think we agree there.
right.
And this is why I kind of go back to my statement when you brought this up. I think you're downplaying it. The reason why I think you're downplaying is because there are plenty of examples where it's happening, where it's just like this is just not acceptable behavior as around children. It just in society in general, like we all live together in a society. We need to find ways to kind of commingle and not, disturb within reason. I think I'm a pretty reasonable person, but and I think there are plenty of examples in sports where it's happening, in the drag queen story hours where it's happening. The schools, there probably are examples in schools if I start digging into it. So I think you are downplaying it, which is the reason why people are fighting back. what's happening is that what is the pendulum swings and it overcorrects one way, and then we all right, we need to fix it, and then it's kind of like maybe stopping somewhere in the middle or a little bit past the middle, we overcorrect the other way as well, where like I wouldn't be surprised if now like maybe we've overcorrected to the point where like now they're legitimately being discriminated against and maybe getting beaten up again, where it's just I don't want that to happen, you know what I mean, because they're human beings. Even though they probably feel like we don't think that they're human beings, but I recognize the fact that they are human beings. So
So I think when I say that it's being blown or out of proportion, I think I'm trying to say like in comparison to other issues that should matter more. For example, 17 million people being removed from Medicaid due to this big beautiful bill.
mm,
I
I've
bet
seen stuff
you,
on that. You and I gotta talk about that. I've seen stuff on
so
that.
so I bet you a lot of these people who voted for these Republicans who are supporting this bill and who voted for Trump, they probably a lot, I'm sure a lot of them, because I know some of them voted because they think that the Democrats are letting, the gay agenda take over, but Trump is going to put a stop to that. So now, if I'm one of those people, I'm like, yes, Trump is in office now. This fiasco and all this the gay agenda, these trans thing, they're that's going to end. And meanwhile, my grandmother's losing access to her medical her pharmacy, her medicine. And it's just like, which one's more important? You know what I'm saying? Like the anger that I feel because I saw some drag queens in front of some kids versus now my someone in my personal family is now their health will be at risk or their financial wellness now because they're gonna have to afford these medicines which were subsidized by the government but were cut by these people because we don't like trans folks, or we don't want trans folks to take over. But now we're losing Medicaid. Like one to me is way more important than the other, and that's why when I started, I talked about personal interests. Like what are the policies that really affect people? The folks that I know who are like super anti the gay agenda, it's just like an emotional like I don't like that. I don't like it. But if it's allowed to happen, is it really gonna ruin your life? Like, is it really gonna harm you, or is it just gonna annoy you?
I
Versus
think
cutting Medicaid.
I think so. I have to interrupt. I think that depends on who you ask. It really does depend on who you ask. If you're talking to a 20-year-old single guy who doesn't really happen, right? But like if you have children, if you have a daughter who plans to get into sports, it could very well directly affect you and your family. So it depends on who you ask. It also depends on short term versus long term. In the short term, cuts to Medicaid that affect your grandmother tomorrow, immediate effect, you're gonna feel that way more. Versus if we just keep conceding with an agenda, and before you know, we turn back and we look back like, whoa, how the hell did we get here? Well, that's from the thousand concessions that we've been making along the way. Just like you admitted, and we both agree that when you and I were younger, the agenda was nowhere near what it is today. It was just let us get married and we'll be happy. Now we have
Yeah,
literally collegiate sports where people stealing medals away from other people. So it's just again, we could talk about that for a long time. I have a lot to say about it. I have a lot to say on camera. I have a lot to say off camera. But in general, I think it's just decent society, and I don't like degeneracy from what no matter what your sexuality is. And I just feel like it's so overly in our face. And it's just like it's just weird to me. That's how I feel about it. Does it mean I think that they're any less human? No. Does it mean I think they need to get beat up? No. That's not how I feel at all. So yeah.
I think it's important to not conflate some of these things. Though, like for example, like equal right to marriage. I don't think it's the same issue that's being like. I think it's a very different issue than what we're seeing now with like trans athletes in sports. I have to assume that if we were to ask, someone who is part of the gay community, they might not be very happy about like their right to marry being conflated with like trans athletes in sports. I think they would probably argue that it's two completely different issues. Even though they're both like advocating
Uh,
for some of the
I'm not
same
equating the
people.
issues. I'm not Quinn. I'm not equating the issues. I'm saying that that was the plight then, and now we have a plight now that, in my opinion, so this is where I'll get into my opinion, is just beyond ridiculous. Men do not belong in women's sports. Maybe you and I would disagree on this. Men are biologically. There's always going to be exceptions. The exceptions don't disprove the rule. Men are almost always biologically, physically stronger, faster than women. It is not fair for us to be in their sports. And you notice in the sports issue, and I'll let me just finish this one point. It's always the men that become women that join in the sports. You never see trans women, a woman who is now a man, trying to go and compete with men because they'll be destroyed.
All right, but what if you were a betting man and
Which,
you were making placing bets on what's one of those apps, those new apps that you can place bets.
like
I,
DraftKings or something.
yeah, in that case, it would make sense because then you would bet for the biologically born male who's going to win each time. You could make a lot of money.
So
I'm
you're saying that
joking.
we should allow it so that I can make money from bets? This is a very weak argument, my friend. I'm gonna tell you.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm joking, but I'm agreeing with you. It's ridiculous. Like, because the biologically male is born, the person born biologically male is going to have 9 times out of 10 physical advantages that are just biological. So, and I think that most people, like vast majority, overwhelming majority of people, will agree to that. And that's the other reason why I think that it's blown out of proportion because it's not even an issue. Like most people agree that it's not a good idea. And the only places where like I don't think that that's ever going to be something that is going to be widely accepted across all 50 states. Like I think it's only going to be like these pockets of like ultra progressive communities that are going to say that it's okay. But I don't think for me, I disagree with it. I disagree with it. And for me, it's not an issue because I do not think so. Like what you were saying about like what's going to happen down the road if we keep making these concessions, I don't necessarily align with that argument because who knows what's going to happen. Like in this case, for example, I could be wrong, but I really don't see this becoming a thing that becomes widely accepted. Because there's just too many people who are just like, no, like this is ridiculous. Like I'm not gonna let my daughter compete against like someone who was born biologically male. Most people, I think, are there, and I don't think they're gonna change their minds.
It's happening though. It's happening in this state. It's happening in Maine. It's happening in California. So it's happening. This is why I'm telling you it's happening. But um, but yeah, I mean it's funny. I mean I didn't want this entire thing to be about that, but I have strong feelings about it. And when I by me having strong feelings about it, I wanna kind of caveat and very give a clear disclaimer that in no way do I think that they are any less human and they don't deserve respect, honor, dignity, all of the above, right? But there's just certain things that are obvious biological facts, and we're just not going to out talk and outwit our biology. And for me, it's just such. I just hate the fact that we've even gotten to this point because I've watched a lot of debates online back and forth about it, and I'm just like, we live in such a privileged freaking society that we can debate something as stupid as are men women and women men. What is a man and what is a woman? You have to be very freaking privileged to have that be something that you have to debate.
Yeah, it's
When
like
you
first world problems.
100% first world problems, bro. So
Yeah, I guess and I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying. We're actually on the same page. My only thing is just I would caution about like lumping things or like lumping different issues. And I know you said you weren't equating the two, but like for any group that has experienced depression, like if they have one victory, um, I think it's a slippery slope to say, well, you guys already got that, so what more do you want? Because like there might be other legitimate things that they are that they have not been had access to. You know what I'm saying? And this happened, with African Americans in this country, where every step of the way, no matter what it was that they were fighting for, people were always like, "Oh my goodness, you guys are already citizens. What do you want? You already have the right to vote. Okay, but they're not allowing us to vote. Jim Crow laws are making it, they're restricting our ability to voter suppression." You're like, no, 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 no. This is too much. You guys already have the right to vote. Well, that mentality of like, oh, we gave you, you give them an inch, they want to take a mile. But it's like, when black folks were arguing about redlining, not just black folks, but people of color, but mostly, those redlining policies where you couldn't even buy a house in a certain neighborhood if you weren't white. Like there was lots of people who I'm sure arguing against that, saying like, well, first we allowed them not to be slaves anymore, or not to be enslaved, and now they want to move in next to us. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just a slippery slope. You gotta be careful. You know?
Yeah, I think that goes back into like the overcorrection in one way or another. I don't fully disagree with that. It's almost like, oh, we gave you this, now shut up, don't complain anymore. I see what you're saying on that.
Yeah. But there might be some legitimate things that we still need to improve. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to hear them out. I doubt I'm gonna agree with them, but I'm willing to hear them out. You know what I mean?
That's
So
good. I mean that because of given like how the media works now, like it's really important to go to talk to people like who belong to certain communities and get it from the source. Like I can't argue in support of that enough. When all this stuff was happening with like the COVID vaccines and the medical care that like I have a cousin who's married to a doctor who was working in the emergency room in Lawrence General Hospital, and there was all this noise about the doctors are in on it, and you know they want to bring up the number of people who are dying. It was all this crazy ideas that were being thrown out there. So I was just like, I got to the point where I called her up and I was just like, yo, people are saying this. Is this true? And like I don't know, like 70% of the claims that were being widely spread on mainstream media, she was like, right here at Lawrence General Hospital in the ER, that is complete nonsense. Like we're not seeing any of that. Like that is not happening. So it's just so important to just actually like figure out, not just depend on what we're seeing on social media and on the news,
in the
because
media, yep,
there's
yep,
people who have agendas.
yeah,
Um, I will say though, I think we might need to end soon.
yeah, I agree.
Um, but I want to say this is something that might be a little controversial, but I think that the Democratic Party especially needed somebody like Trump to come into power. Um, and I do know a lot of people who aren't traditional Republicans who voted for Trump because they wanted a disruption to like the status quo, business as usual. So the Democratic Party is very, has its fair share of faults. Like there's a lot of Democrats who are corrupt. There's a lot of Democrats who are completely bought and paid for. Um, and this is Republicans too, but I'm critical of the Democrats because I feel like Trump is an indictment of the Democratic Party, the establishment. Trump is basically a kind of like a opposite spectrum of whatever the Democrats want to represent. Trump is like complete, contradiction to it. It's like a slap in the face to whatever the Democrats view as what government should be or look like. Um, and I think it was necessary because I think that the Democratic establishment, I should say, they do live in this echo chamber where they do like these pockets where they're like detached from reality, like they're detached from what's happening on the ground, to the point where they say crazy things like Biden, if you're black, you better vote for me or whatever. You know,
You don't vote
um,
for me, you ain't black.
yeah, that. So it's like there's a lot of Democrats who are just banking on the old traditional kind of like cliche, phrases and things to get like minorities to support you and all that. And then when it comes to policy, they weren't delivering. They haven't been delivering. A lot of the times, I will say Republicans were the reason they weren't able to deliver on many things, but because that's just the way the political system works. It's two parties, one against the other adversary. But there are so many Democrats who are so Kamala, Kamala Harris. And here's the thing, and damn, there's so much to say. Kamala Harris was not a strong candidate. She was not a strong candidate. For somebody like Trump,
I was worried that you would not be able to admit that, so I instantly have more respect for you just for admitting that. I'll just start with that.
thank you. So she was not a strong candidate, especially against like in juxtaposition with somebody like Trump, in comparison to somebody like Trump. Trump is he's off the script, He's a knee-jerk guy. He's gonna say whatever's on his mind. He doesn't care about being polite or politically correct. So that's why people feel like they can trust him, as opposed to, and then compared to somebody like Kamala, who's extremely scripted. She didn't go on Joe Rogan. Trump did all 3 hours on Joe Rogan. He comes off as relatable. That's how you show people that you're relatable. She was the type of candidate who's afraid that if she went on a place like Joe Rogan, she would say the wrong thing and lose votes. Somebody like Trump, he's like, I'm gonna say whatever the hell's on my mind and people are gonna like me for it. I agree. That's how it should be.
Mhm.
But when you put somebody like Kamala against somebody like Trump, immediately when it comes to like people who vote based on things like authenticity and like, who seems more relatable, who seems more trustworthy, even a guy like Trump, they're gonna say is more trustworthy than somebody like Kamala, who seems like they're just Hillary Clinton the same way. Put your finger in the wind, whichever direction the wind is blowing, that's where we're gonna go. For the most part, there's certain things that they're strong on because they feel like that's where the party's core values are. But when it comes to these controversial issues, Trump, like the other day, Trump called Israel and Iran fucking whatever. He said they don't know what the fuck they're
I don't
doing.
know what the fuck they're doing. Yeah.
Like he got a lot of respect from even from me by saying that. Somebody like Kamala would never say that. You know what I'm saying? A lot of politicians would never say something like that.
It was
But
a
as that's
real
the extreme
moment.
example.
Like it was a very
Yeah,
authentic, real, like you saw how he was actually feeling. So I think that's kind of what you're trying
yeah.
to convey.
So I think right now, because of all the mistrust, like there is a lot of mistrust of government, like across the board. So so politicians in general are not seen as somebody you trust. They're seen as people who are manipulative, people who are just trying to, do whatever they can get more donorship, funding. They're going to create policies to support their shareholders, so to speak, right? And then you introduce somebody like Trump into that space, he's like a breath of fresh air. The Democrats need to learn from that. Like the Democrats, there's so many well-established Democrats, like the people who are part of these establishment Democrats, they're all the same. Like they're looking to see the focus group. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, let's try, let's try this messaging. But let's bring this to a focus group. Let's see what they think. Screw that, man. What do you think as a mother, as a father, as a neighbor, as a concerned citizen? What do you really feel about what's happening in this country? And that's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear what you think what you think they want. I can't even say it.
But
They
you
don't want to
think,
hear
but you
what
think they want to hear.
exactly. They want to hear just what you think, and then make an informed decision. So the Democrat, and then so the Democrats really need a wake up call because there's so many established Democrats, even in the local level, politically, here, in this area. Like everybody wants to be like this perfect cookie cutter, you know, polished, person, and it's just comes off as disingenuous, unauthentic.
Yep.
Um, and the Democratic Party really needs to wake up to that. Like all of this pandering to like marginalized groups. I think again, like I mentioned, I'm somebody who is concerned with helping, advocate for marginalized groups, people who are oppressed. I want everybody to be treated equal. That's a big value, but it can't be the entire agenda. There's still an entire country you have to worry about. You can't if you see that you're by advocating for a small group, you're taking a lot, or at least perceptively, people are starting to see in the majority group and the dominant group are starting to see that they're losing power or they're losing rights. Instead of like, you have to address it and invite people in and talk to them about it. But instead, I feel like people were being shamed, like
Mhm.
for like white folks for trying to say, any white person who would not agree with some policy was immediately claimed labeled as a racist. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like that's what the Democratic Party, not all of them, but like the Democratic Party in many ways took up this messaging and ran with it, and that pushed a lot of white voters away from the Democratic Party. That pushed a lot of other dominant groups. And so, if you ask me, I think the election was handed to Donald Trump. One, because Kamala wasn't a good, strong candidate, and two, because the Democratic Party was just they weren't strong on these issues that I just shared. Like the
Felt like they
message,
were
the
constantly taking.
relatability.
It felt like they were constantly taking the 20 on the 80-20 issues.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's just bad. Like it doesn't make political sense. You know what I'm saying? Like you got to get elected. You need people to vote for you. and you think you're gonna get people to vote for you based on, these idealistic appeals that really don't resonate with is are not resonating, with the majority. Even though it shows like I was listening to somebody talking about data that the majority of there were some polls that came out recently that saying that the majority of the American public actually agrees that discrimination is still a problem. Like racial discrimination and LGBTQ discrimination is still actually a problem in this country. So, but I think what happens is that the people on the left took it too far. They went too aggressive with it. And like you said, you were talking about the pendulum. I think it's swinging in the other direction. Like I'm a very big believer in call in culture versus calling out. I don't believe in cancel culture. So that's another thing I agree with Candace Owens. I think like when you try to cancel and shame people publicly like that, it backfires because it ends up looking like you're just trying to censor and control and take people's freedom of speech, and that's gonna backfire.
Yeah.
Another big one is like gun rights. Like Bernie Sanders uh he has it figured out. In Vermont, in the rural Vermont, gun culture is huge. And he's a ultra progressive Democrat who continuously gets elected over and over again because he doesn't bother people when it comes to the Second Amendment. So people who are huge on the Second Amendment in Vermont, they're okay with Bernie because they're like, you know what, he's on the left, he's on that side, but he's not going to try to take our guns. I feel like that issue right there is an easy one. There's certain issues like the trans in sports, the guns issue, that the Democrats are just like, to me, as somebody who tries to analyze politics, like why would you choose these issues as what the ones you're gonna like die on? Like this is what you're willing to die on. When you know damn right that there are people in this country who love we have a very strong gun culture in the United States. And you're
Mhm.
basically gonna take the side of saying, we want you, whether it's a perception or not, because I honestly, like, I have seen Democrats talking about taking away people's assault rifles and things like that. And I think there's valid arguments to be made, but once you start telling people you're going to take away their guns, you're going to lose
That's it.
a
You
ton of
lost.
support.
Yeah.
So
100%. Yeah.
and I think there should be a way to like work on the school shootings, the mass shootings, right? I think if there should be a way that both sides can come together and be like we got to figure out how to not let crazy people get guns, high capacity assault rifles. I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes we assume that everybody on the right thinks that it's okay for everybody to have a gun, even if you're a psycho. But I don't think people on the right would agree with that, you know?
No. Yeah. I mean, here, I think yeah, that's a whole nother discussion in of itself. Listen, I gotta end it here, but I do want to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate your perspective and respectfulness as well. Even just like your willingness to have this conversation, which is pretty rare these days with people who disagree or maybe are on opposite sides of the political spectrum, and are able to just have discourse like you said, right? It's super important. I actually want to continue having further conversations on and off record, but yeah, maybe we can find some other topics where we strongly disagree and maybe kind of hash it out. I think that'd be pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, thank you, man. Biggest thing I just want to kind of like mention or biggest takeaway is I think more people should be moved towards the center when it comes to at least trying to have discourse. Because
Mhm.
when everybody's like on opposite ends, like that's when I feel like that just creates a lot of tension and
Yeah.
people won't listen to each other. I feel like honestly the biggest I really dislike the two-party system. I think the two-party system is literally gonna be the end of this country. Like if there is a collapse, I think it's gonna be one of the major factors that historians in the future are gonna look at is the two-party system. And so I think the biggest way that we can uh deconstruct the two-party system is by everybody being like rejecting this tendency to like go either all the way to the right or all the way to the left. And that way the two-party system loses power, it loses influence with
Or
more
yeah, just
independent
like I
thinkers.
mentioned, tribalism, right? Like the us versus them mentality. Whereas, I could have easily just written you off and be like, yeah, like he's a libtard or he's a Democrat, like he'll never get it, he'll never be reasonable. But I think you've been very reasonable throughout this conversation. Um, and I like to consider myself a reasonable person. Maybe I'm self-labeling, I don't know. But yeah,
I grant you that.
much appreciated, much appreciated. But yeah, tell people what you have going on. What are you up to, and if you want anybody to kind of follow along in anything that you have going on with your dissertation or anything other than that, feel free.
Thank you. Yeah, just I'll try to keep it quick. I'll have my PhD in September, God willing. Um, thank you. After
Dr. Quinn.
that, that's right. After that, it's gonna be a big like this summer. I'm gonna take a lot of time to just figure out exactly what path I want to take that in my career. But I do enjoy having the flexibility of like not right now. There's a lot of flexibility in my life. I'm not my last day working as an educator at Lawrence High School was Monday, so I've got a lot of space to figure things out. And actually, this format right here is something I find very appealing. So I've been talking to some people about doing I don't know if it'll be a podcast or just a series of interviews with really interesting people that I think have a lot to offer with regard to like inner work, kind of like more in the therapy psychology area, relationships, healing, trauma, inner trauma, all of that, like shadow work. For me, that's a very fascinating topic, and I think everyone should know more about it. Um, and I think it's like I've done a lot of learning in that area for myself because I have my own mental health struggles, and I think there's some really brilliant people that I've had the opportunity to meet along my journey that I would just love to have them like capture the wisdom that they have to impart in a format like this. So I guess keep a lookout for that if that happens. I'm pretty excited about it.
Post and stuff like that
And
on your social medias or what?
yeah, definitely be on. I don't know if I'll create a new channel just for that, like a new page or new profile. I don't have a TikTok. Maybe I'm thinking about creating that. I'm also going to be working as a consultant, like an education consultant, and also considering life coach services. And this is not something that I've like just thought up myself. It's because like people have come forward and asked me to help guide them along. So I feel like it's a calling, So if that's really what I'm anointed to do in this life, I really do believe like on a spiritual level, whatever we are anointed with, I think it's our duty to share that gift with our brothers and sisters, to make the world a better place.
So if
So
somebody
if
wants to
that's
reach
my
out to you,
calling,
yeah, well, if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the easiest way for them to find you?
email q.ganel@gmail.com. You can see the spelling of my last name there. Or just follow me on Instagram, Quin Ganel, same spelling, or on Facebook, I'm on there as well. I'm on LinkedIn, same name. Um, but yeah, that's what it's gonna be an extra interesting time. I'm not sure in the next few months there's gonna be a lot of decision making or big decisions around where I'm gonna take my life. What's the next chapter? So it's really exciting. There might even be politics down the road. I've had several people approach me and ask me to run for local politics, which I have recently decided to decline. But down the road, once I've got things more like my basics squared away, I also feel called to do some work in that arena.
Sick. All right, bro. Well, I'll definitely hope to, have further discussions with you in the future. Maybe we can go grab a beer sometime or something like that.
Thank you. And yeah, no, and I hope that people are able to see that this is like possible.
Yeah,
People can disagree and still have a engaging and respectful and even entertaining, time conversation. So thank you for leading in that way.
absolutely, bro. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good night.
You too. Peace, brother.
Bye.